If someone had told me that my father, the old man in his late 60s, would be kneeling on the bare marble floor begging the wealthiest alpha in the territory to take me, I would have doubted it, or laughed, because I was never worth that kind of trouble. My name is Simon, an 18-year-old Omega born under a bad moon, or so the village healers whispered when I was small. The illness came before I could even walk properly. I was diagnosed with a very rare illness that even the best doctors called incurable. No name for it, no cure. Just endless, bone-deep exhaustion that could swallow me whole without warning. Phantom pains that felt like hot iron rods being driven through my muscles. Fevers that came and went for no reason. Healers poked and prodded, burned herbs under my nose, forced bitter teas down my throat. Nothing changed the truth. I was broken in a way no one could fix. I came from a poor background. My father farmed a scrap of rocky land that barely fed us. Every coin went to bread first, then whatever poultice or tonic the traveling medicine seller swore would help me, the pale Omega boy. Most of it was lies. We sold the goat last winter to pay for one final examination. The old healer just sighed and said, "Some Omegas carry burdens medicine can't cure. Perhaps it's the soul itself that's weary," but my father never gave up. The sun shined brightly on the crowded marketplace of Silver Ridge territory. Dust swirled around bare feet and cartwheels. The air thick with the smells of roasted meat, sweat, and desperation. Merchants shouted prices for spices, fabrics, and livestock and people. Yes, people like me. I was standing on a low wooden platform that creaked under my slight weight, my wrists loosely bound with rough hemp, not tight enough to bruise, just enough to remind everyone I was being offered. My father stood beside me, shoulders hunched, eyes scanning the crowd like a man searching for one last miracle. I could feel the heat pounding against my skin. Without warning, the familiar wave crashed over my body. My knees buckled first. Then the burning started, sharp, invisible flames licking up my veins from my toes to my fingertips. My vision blurred at the edges, colors bleeding together until the faces in the crowd looked like smeared paint. I tried to stay upright, tried so hard to look useful, desirable, anything but broken. But my body betrayed me the way it always did. I collapsed. The fall wasn't graceful. My shoulder hit the rough planks, pain spiking through already aching bones. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Someone muttered, "He fainted again?" Another laughed, short and cruel. "Who would want that one? Looks half dead already." My father dropped to his knees beside me in an instant, his rough hands cupping my face. "Simon, breathe. Just breathe, son." His voice cracked on the last word. I could smell the faint scent of soil and tobacco on his worn shirt. I forced my eyes open, fighting the darkness pulling at me. Through the haze I saw them, the alphas circling like wolves who'd already decided the prey wasn't worth the hunt. One by one they turned away. A tall one with silver-streaked hair shook his head. "He is too frail. I need an Omega who can work, bear pups, not one who'll spend half his life in a sick bed." Another, younger and cockier, snorted. "Pretty face maybe. But pretty doesn't scrub floors when you're fainting every hour." Each rejection landed like another lash across my already fragile heart. That day in the market was our 10th public offering in 3 months. Each time we went home emptier than before. No mate, no buyer, no future. As the crowd thinned and the sun dipped lower, painting the sky bloody red, my father helped me sit up. I leaned against him, shivering despite the heat. He didn't speak for a long minute, just held me like I might disappear if he let go. Then he whispered, so quiet only I could hear, "There's one last chance, Simon. One I swore I'd never take." I looked up at him. His face was carved from grief and determination. "Ryan Blackthorne has returned from the overseas campaigns 3 weeks ago. Richest man in the territory now, owns half the shipping routes, estates that stretch to the mountains. They say he's cold, hardened by war, but they also say he has a heart under all that steel. If anyone has the means to keep you alive, it's him." My stomach twisted. "Father, he won't want a sick servant. No one does. He might feel pity." My father said, almost pleading with himself as much as with me. "Pity can be enough. I'll beg if I have to. I'll offer you as the lowest worker, cleaning boots, washing dishes, anything. Just to get a roof, medicine and food. A chance to breathe without worrying you'll die in the night." Tears burned behind my eyes. The thought of being sold, of becoming property instead of a son, should have broken me. But the alternative was worse. Watching my father bury me before his time. I nodded once, small and shaky. He pressed his forehead to mine. I'm sorry, my boy, but I have to do this. My father never gave up. He carried me when I couldn't walk. He sang the old lullabies even when his voice shook. But I saw the lines deepening around his eyes, the way his hands trembled when he counted the last few coppers when we got home. He was losing hope, not for himself but for me. The journey to Ryan Blackthorne's estate began before the sun had fully risen, yet by the time we were halfway there, it already felt like the sky was punishing us. We could not afford a taxi, so we walked. The road stretched endlessly ahead, dusty and uneven, and the scorching sun climbed higher with each step as if determined to test how badly we wanted this chance. My sandals were thin, and small stones pressed painfully against the soles of my feet. I tried not to limp, because my father was already walking slower than usual. He was in his late 60s. His back was no longer straight like it used to be, and every few minutes he would cough lightly into his fist, pretending it was nothing. I pretended not to notice. Sweat soaked through my shirt, clinging to my skin uncomfortably. My vision blurred once or twice, and I had to steady myself against a tree when a wave of dizziness passed through me. Are you all right? He asked immediately. I forced a smile. If I faint, just drag me the rest of the way. He actually laughed at that, though it sounded tired. It took us nearly 4 hours to reach the gates of Blackthorne Estate. I had heard stories about it, but seeing it in person made my chest tighten. The gates alone were taller than any building in our neighborhood, forged from black iron with intricate designs twisting through the metal. Beyond them, I could see a long driveway lined with perfectly trimmed trees, leading to a mansion so grand it almost didn't look real. For a moment, I wondered if we had stepped into the wrong world. 2 security guards stood at the entrance, dressed sharply, their expressions hard the moment they looked at us. They did not see visitors. They saw beggars. State your mission, one of them asked flatly. My father stepped forward politely. We would like to see Mr. Ryan Blackthorne. The guard's eyes flicked over our worn clothes and dusty shoes. Mr. Blackthorne left early for a business meeting, he said. You should go home. Go home? The word felt heavier than it should have. We can wait, my father said gently. There is no point, the second security added. He won't see you. My father hesitated, but I surprised even myself when I spoke. We'll wait, I said firmly. The guards exchanged looks, clearly irritated, but they did not physically remove us. Perhaps they assumed the sun would drive us away soon enough. We waited outside close to the gates for 6 more hours. 6 long punishing hours under the relentless heat. My legs trembled by the 3rd hour. By the 4th, my throat felt dry enough to crack. By the 5th, my fever began creeping in, a slow burn beneath my skin. Till we stayed. My father refused to sit, as if standing made him appear more respectable. I finally lowered myself to the ground when my vision swam dangerously, and he stood protectively in front of me like he could shield me from humiliation. As the sun began to descend, painting the sky in deep orange hues, the distant sound of an engine reached our ears. A sleek black car approached the gates smoothly, its surface gleaming even in the fading light. The guards immediately straightened. That's him, one muttered. As the car slowed, one of the guards turned to us sharply. Leave now. Our boss does not want loiterers at his gate. But we did not move. The gates opened, and the car drove inside the luxurious compound, disappearing briefly down the long driveway. My heart sank. We had waited all day. For nothing. Then, unexpectedly, the car stopped. The driver's door opened, and he stepped out. Ryan Blackthorne. Even from a distance, I could tell why people spoke about him with such awe. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that did not need to announce itself. His suit fit him perfectly, simple but undeniably expensive. His dark hair was neatly styled, slightly tousled by the evening breeze, and his features were sharp yet calm. He did not look arrogant. He looked grounded. His presence was powerful but not suffocating. It was steady, controlled, like a calm storm waiting to decide whether it would rain. He said something briefly to the guard near him, and then his gaze shifted toward the gate and he looked at us. He spoke again and one of the guards hurried toward us. Our boss will see you briefly, he said stiffly. My father's shoulders sagged in relief. We were escorted inside the estate, my heart pounding louder with every step. The driveway seemed even longer from within, and by the time we reached the front entrance, My fever had fully bloomed beneath my skin. Ryan stood at the top of the steps, watching us approach. Up close he was even more striking. His eyes were sharp but not cruel, and when they landed on me, they did not immediately narrow in judgment like other alphas had. Instead they assessed. "Why are you here?" he asked calmly. My father bowed deeply. "Mr. Blackthorn, please forgive our intrusion. I am a poor man with nothing left to offer but my son. I beg you, buy him from me. Give him some work. I only ask for a few pounds so I can settle my debts and afford my daily meals." Ryan's gaze shifted to me. "And why should I?" he asked evenly. "I already have more workers than I need." My throat tightened. My father stepped closer. "He can wash dishes, clean your shoes, sweep the floors. He won't complain. He is obedient and hardworking." Ryan remained silent. "I'm not looking to purchase anyone," he said finally. That was when my father did something that made my chest ache. He fell to his knees. Right there on the polished stone. "Please," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "If he stays with me he will only suffer. I cannot provide for him anymore. Take him, I beg you." I stared at Ryan through the blur of heat and emotion. For a moment, something changed in his expression. Not annoyance, not disgust. Something softer. He looked at my father. Then at me. And after what felt like an eternity, he sighed quietly. "Stand up," he said to my father. "I will take him." Just like that, my life shifted. I did not know then whether I had been rescued or abandoned. All I knew was that as the gates of Blackthorn Estate closed behind my father, I was no longer his son. I belonged to Ryan Blackthorn. I do not know the exact amount Mr. Ryan gave my father that evening. He never told me. The only words that came out of his mouth was, "Take care, son, be a good boy." Then he left without looking back at me. The gates closed with a heavy clang behind him, and the sound echoed inside my chest. I felt the relief wash over him. The kind of relief that makes an old man's shoulders finally drop after carrying the weight of the world for too long. We walked in, and the servants began whispering almost immediately. They did not try to hide it. "Another stray kid? He looks like he'll faint soon," one said. "Why would master bring in someone like that?" another added. Their eyes swept over me as if I were an insect that had crawled in by accident. I kept my gaze lowered, swallowing the sting of humiliation. I had expected this. What I did not expect was for one of them, an older Omega with kind eyes and flower-dusted sleeves, to step forward. "Come," he said quietly. "I'll show you your room." My room? The words felt strange. I followed him down a long hallway polished so clean I was afraid to leave footprints. When he opened the door and stepped aside, I froze. The room was small compared to the rest of the mansion, but to me it looked like something from a dream. There was a Real bed with a thick mattress, not a thin mat on the floor. There was a wooden wardrobe, a small desk, and even a window that allowed sunlight to pour inside. Back home, our entire house could have fit into half of this space. "It's for me?" I asked quietly. The servant gave a small nod. "Do not cause trouble, and you will be fine here." When he left, I stood in the center of the room for a long time, afraid to touch anything. Then cautiously I sat on the bed. For the first time in years, I lay down without feeling the hardness of the ground against my bones. The next morning I began working. I woke before sunrise, determined to prove I was not useless. I washed dishes in the kitchen until my fingers wrinkled. I polished shoes until I could see my reflection in the leather. I swept hallways that were already spotless, just in case I had missed something invisible. Some of the servants watched me with suspicion, waiting for me to collapse. I almost did twice. But I steadied myself against counters and forced my body to cooperate. Strangely, I barely saw Mr. Ryan. He left before most of us woke and returned long after the sky had darkened. His presence was felt more than seen. The air would shift slightly when he entered the mansion, a calm but powerful alpha scent settling over everything. On the fourth day I made a decision. If I could not impress him with strength, I would show him respect. So I began waiting near the front entrance each evening. At first the guards looked confused. "What are you doing here?" one asked. "I'll help him carry his things," I replied simply. When his car finally rolled into the driveway that night, my heart pounded harder than it should have. I straightened my back, ignoring the faint ache in my limbs. The car stopped. The driver stepped out and opened the back door. Ryan emerged, tall and composed as always, loosening his cufflinks slightly as he stepped onto the stone driveway. I hurried forward before I could lose my nerve. "Let me help you, sir," I said softly, reaching for his briefcase. He paused. It was the first time we had stood this close since the day he agreed to take me in. Up close, his features were striking. There was something grounded about him, something steady that made the chaos in my own body feel quieter. He handed me the briefcase without resistance. "You don't have to wait here," he said. "It's no trouble," I replied quickly. "I finish my tasks early." He studied me for a moment as we walked toward the entrance. "What is your name?" he asked suddenly. I almost stumbled. 4 days in this mansion, and this was the first time he had asked. "Simon," I answered. "My name is Simon." He nodded once as if committing it to memory. "How old are you, Simon?" "Almost 19, sir." "You look younger." I smiled faintly. I hear that often. For a brief second, the corner of his lips lifted. It was not a full smile, but it was enough. "Do your duties well and take care of your health," he said as we reached the door. My breath caught. He had noticed. "Yes, sir," I whispered. I watched him dash into his own bedroom. That night, as I lay in the soft bed that still felt unreal, I realized that my life was finally having a better side. 2 weeks passed faster than I expected. At first, every day inside Blackthorn Estate felt like I was walking on fragile glass, afraid that one wrong step would shatter whatever fragile tolerance the household had for me. But slowly, the rhythm of the mansion became familiar. By the end of the second week, my hands moved automatically. I knew which servant preferred silence in the morning and which one hummed while working. I learned that the head cook pretended to be strict but always set aside an extra bun for me when he thought I looked pale. The whispers stopped. The stare softened. I was no longer the stray boy from the gate. I was simply Simon. My body still betrayed me sometimes. A sudden wave of dizziness here. A mild fever there. But the steady meals and clean room helped more than I expected. I was not strong yet, but I was better. And somehow I found myself looking forward to evenings. Waiting at the door for him had become a habit. Mr. Ryan rarely said much, but he never stopped me from taking his briefcase. Sometimes our shoulders brushed as we walked inside, and every single time, my heart reacted like it had forgotten how to behave. A few days later, I noticed something different. He returned earlier than usual. His steps were slower. Most people would not have noticed, but I did. His scent, usually calm and steady like cool rain, carried a faint sharpness that evening. His brows were drawn together slightly, and there was a stiffness in the way he rolled his shoulders. Ryan was unwell. That night, instead of going straight to my room, I slipped into the kitchen after finishing my tasks. I asked the cook for permission to use a few herbs. He raised a brow but handed them over without question. I had grown up surrounded by herbs and bitter concoctions. When you are sick your whole life, you learn what eases headaches, what lowers a mild fever, and what calms an unsettled body. I boiled water gently, adding crushed leaves and a slice of dried root. The scent rose warm and earthy, comforting. Cradling the cup carefully, I walked toward his study. My heart thudded nervously as I knocked. "Come in," his voice called. I stepped forward quietly. "Sir," I said softly, placing the cup down. "You should drink this." His eyes lifted to mine, calm but curious. "And what is this?" he asked. "Herbal tea," I replied. "It helps with fatigue and mild headaches." He leaned back slightly in his chair. "How did you know I wasn't feeling fine?" I hesitated, then answered honestly. "As someone who has always been sick, I can tell when someone else is not okay." For a moment, something unreadable flickered in his gaze. He picked up the cup, studying the steam rising from it, then took a careful sip. I held my breath. He took another sip, then another. "It's not bad," he said calmly. Relief washed over me so strongly that I nearly smiled too widely. I realized then that I was staring. Not at the cup but at him. At the way his throat moved when he swallowed. At the faint crease between his brows slowly easing. "Simon." His voice snapped me out of it. "Yes, sir?" "Why are you staring at me?" Heat rushed to my face instantly. I stammered, stepping back quickly. "I was just making sure it wasn't too bitter." The corner of his mouth lifted. Not a full smile. "If I collapse after drinking this, I will know who to blame," he said jokingly. "I would never poison you," I blurted out before I could stop myself. His smirk deepened slightly. "I know. He finished the tea slowly, setting the empty cup down with deliberate calm. "Thank you, Simon," he said. My chest tightened strangely at the sound of my name on his lips. I bowed quickly, mumbling something about checking the kitchen, and nearly fled the study. The hallway felt cooler than before, but my face remained warm. By the time I reached my room and closed the door behind me, I pressed my back against it, exhaling shakily. What was that? It had been a simple conversation. A cup of tea, a few words. And yet my heart was racing like I had run miles under the scorching sun again. I touched my burning cheeks and laughed softly at myself. "You're hopeless," I muttered. But as I lay in bed that night, replaying the way he had said my name and the faint smirk that followed, I realized something unsettling. For the first time in my life, my heart was not racing because of illness. It was racing because of him. Peace, I learned, never lasts long in a place this grand. It arrived quietly one afternoon in the form of a luxurious Rolls-Royce and too many suitcases. Her name was Lillian. I knew it before she even introduced herself because she announced it loudly at the entrance, as if the walls themselves needed to memorize it. "I'm sure Ryan told you I would be staying," she said sweetly to the head servant, though from the way the man stiffened, I could tell he had heard no such thing. Lillian was beautiful in the way expensive things often are. Perfectly styled hair. Dresses that shimmered when she moved. Jewelry that caught the light at every angle. Her perfume filled the hallway long after she walked past, strong and floral. She claimed she needed to spend the night because she had an early flight the next morning. That was the first lie. The second was when the next morning came, and she did not leave. Her parents, I overheard from the other servants, were major shareholders at Mr. Ryan's company. Important people. Influential people. The kind of people one did not casually offend. By the second day, it became painfully clear that Lillian had not come for a flight. She had come for him. She clung to Ryan every chance she got. When he walked through the hallway, she appeared at his side as if summoned by magic. When he sat in the living room reviewing documents, she would lean far too close, peering at papers she clearly did not understand. "Ryan, you work too hard," she would pout. "You should relax more." He would simply nod and continue reading. I tried not to watch but failed. The first time she looped her arm through his, something unpleasant twisted inside my chest. I told myself it was nothing. She was a guest. She had every right to stand close to him. But when she laughed too loudly and placed her hand on his shoulder, I nearly dropped the tray I was carrying. On the third day, the situation became unbearable. Ryan was heading toward the door for work when Lillian practically skipped down the stairs after him. "Wait for me," she called. "I'll come with you to the office today." Ryan paused. I was standing near the entrance again, ready to take his briefcase, pretending very hard that I did not care. He glanced at her, calm as always. "I'll wait," he said evenly. "Finish your makeup." She beamed. "You're so sweet." Sweet. I almost choked. She rushed back upstairs, and for exactly 3 seconds there was silence. Then Ryan turned to the driver. "Let's go." The car engine started immediately. I blinked. The gates opened. And just like that he left. I stood there stunned. 5 minutes later, Lillian reappeared, flawless and glowing, handbag in hand. "Ryan?" she called lightly as she descended the stairs. The silence answered her. She stepped outside just in time to see the car disappearing at the end of the driveway. Her face darkened. The transformation was almost impressive. I could not stop it. A small scoff escaped me. It was barely a sound, more like air leaving my nose too sharply. But she heard it. Her head snapped toward me. "What's funny?" she demanded. My heart dropped to my stomach. "Nothing, ma'am," I said quickly, lowering my head. "Sorry, ma'am." Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. For a moment I thought she might say something cruel. Instead, she huffed and spun on her heel, storming back into the mansion. The sound of her heels against the marble floor echoed with fury. The other servants avoided eye contact with me, but I could see the corners of their mouths twitching. I busied myself with adjusting my sleeves, pretending innocence. But inside, I felt something dangerously close to satisfaction. Still, the jealousy lingered. Every time she leaned into him at dinner, every time she tried to hold his hand, and he gently but firmly slipped away, my chest tightened painfully. I told myself it was foolish. He was not mine. I was only a servant. A boy bought out of pity. And yet, when Lillian laughed too loudly at something he did not even find amusing, I found myself gripping a glass too tightly. One evening, she reached for his hand openly while speaking. He withdrew it smoothly, picking up his cup instead. She blinked in surprise. I looked down quickly, pretending to focus on the tablecloth. But I could not ignore the warmth spreading through me. Why should her presence disturb me so much? She was beautiful, powerful, everything I was not. And yet, he never looked at her the way he looked at me when asking if I had eaten. That thought both comforted and terrified me. Lillian finally left the mansion on the fourth morning, dressed elegantly and pretending she had somewhere important to be, and although the house felt lighter without her perfume lingering in the halls, I did not feel as peaceful as I thought I would. A few days after her departure, an uneasy feeling began creeping into my body. At first, it was subtle, like a quiet warning beneath my skin. My hands trembled slightly while polishing silver, and I had to pause twice while sweeping because the room would suddenly spin. I told myself it was nothing. But that night was different. The air turned unusually cold, and the wind pressed against my window as if trying to force its way inside. No matter how tightly I wrapped myself in blankets, I could not stop shivering. Then without warning, the heat came. It felt as if fire had replaced my blood. My breathing became uneven, and when I tried to sit up, a sharp dizziness forced me back down. I must have made a sound because the door suddenly opened. "Simon?" one of the Omega servants called softly. I tried to answer, but my voice barely came out. He rushed to my bedside and placed his hand on my forehead. "You're burning up," he said in alarm. The room blurred after that. I heard hurried footsteps echoing down the hallway and a firm knock on another door. Minutes later, my door opened again. Ryan stepped inside. He did not look calm this time. His brows were drawn tightly together, and there was something urgent in his eyes. "Simon?" he called as he crossed the room quickly. His hand touched my forehead, then moved to my neck. His expression hardened. "How long has he been like this?" "I just found him, sir," the servant replied nervously. Ryan did not hesitate. Before I could fully understand what was happening, he slid one arm beneath my back and the other under my knees and lifted me carefully. My head fell weakly against his chest, and even through the haze of fever, I could hear his heartbeat, steady but faster than usual. "Get my bike," he ordered sharply. "The car will take too long." Cold night air hit my face as he carried me outside. Within moments, I was seated on his motorcycle. "Sit up and hold me tightly," he instructed firmly. "The bike will be faster." I did as he said, clutching his shirt with trembling fingers. The engine roared to life and we sped into the night. The wind cut harshly against my overheated skin, and I buried my face against him for warmth. "Stay awake, Simon," he said near my ear. "Do you hear me? Stay with me." "I'm trying," I whispered weakly. Hospital lights flooded my vision when we arrived. Nurses rushed toward us immediately, lifting me onto a stretcher. "High fever," one of them muttered. "Pulse unstable. Get him into a room now." Everything after that felt distant. Cold cloth pressed to my forehead. A needle sliding into my arm. Ryan's voice speaking firmly at the reception desk. "Run every necessary test," he said. "Do not delay treatment. I'll handle the payment." When I woke properly, the room was quiet except for the soft beeping of a monitor. My body felt heavy but cooler. I turned my head slowly. Ryan was sitting beside the bed. His hair looked slightly disordered, as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly. He was holding my hand firmly, as if afraid I would disappear. "You're awake," he said softly, relief clear in his voice. "What happened?" I murmured. "You collapsed," he replied. "Your pheromones spiked dangerously high, causing a high fever." The doctor entered shortly after and adjusted his glasses while reviewing a file. "Mr. Blackthorne, this patient has a rare pheromone disorder," the doctor explained calmly. "His body reacts aggressively to stress and temperature changes. It is not contagious, but it can become severe if unmanaged. With consistent medication and proper care, he can live normally." "Will he recover from this episode?" Ryan asked immediately. "Yes, but he must avoid exhaustion and extreme conditions," the doctor replied. "Then ensure he receives the best treatment available," Ryan said firmly. "Cost is not a concern." The doctor nodded and left. Silence settled in the room. "I'm sorry," I whispered weakly. "I caused trouble again." His grip on my hand tightened. "Don't say that," he said quietly but firmly. I looked at him, surprised by the intensity in his gaze. "You are not trouble," he continued. My throat tightened. He brushed a strand of hair away from my forehead, his touch careful and warm. "You're going to get better," he said. "I will make sure of it." Those words settled deep inside my chest. And as I lay there in that hospital bed, my hand still wrapped securely in his, I realized something that frightened me more than any fever ever had. I was no longer afraid of my illness, but was afraid of the feelings developing inside me. After the night at the hospital, something changed between us. Ryan did not return to being distant. If anything, he became gentler. When I was discharged a few days later, he personally brought me back to the mansion. My room had been rearranged while I was gone. The curtains were thicker to keep out cold drafts, a small heater had been placed near the bed, and fresh flowers sat on the desk by the window. I stared at them in confusion. "You don't like flowers?" he asked from behind me. "I've never had flowers in my room before," I replied softly. "Then you should get used to it," he said calmly. "They'll be replaced every few days." Meals changed too. The kitchen began preparing richer dishes for me, balanced meals with fresh fruits and warm soups. If I tried to skip one, a servant would immediately say, "Master's orders." One evening, Ryan walked into the dining room carrying a small box. "This is for you," he said, placing it in front of me. I blinked in surprise. "For me?" "Open it." Inside was a wristwatch. Simple. Elegant. Far too expensive for someone like me. "I can't accept this," I said quickly. "You can," he replied. "You're terrible at remembering medicine times. This will help." I laughed softly despite myself. "You noticed?" "I notice everything about you," he said without hesitation. The words made my chest tighten. He began checking on me daily, sometimes twice a day. "Did you take your medicine? Did you rest? Are you cold?" It felt strange to have someone care so openly. One afternoon, while we were sitting in the garden, sunlight filtering gently through the trees, he asked a question that caught me off guard. "Simon," he said, his voice calm but serious, "what is your dream?" I looked at him, confused. "My dream? If there were no limits," he continued, "no illness, no poverty, no restrictions, what would you want?" I stared down at my hands. No one had ever asked me that before. I hesitated. I wanted to go back to school. He remained silent, encouraging me to continue. "I had to stop after secondary school," I admitted. "We couldn't afford college, and with my illness, it felt impossible. I didn't want to waste money just to collapse halfway through a semester." "And what would you study?" he asked. "Accountancy," I replied almost shyly. I always liked numbers. He watched me carefully. "Then you will study accountancy," he said simply. I laughed softly, thinking he was joking. "It's not that easy." "It is," he replied. "I will enroll you in one of the best universities. You'll also have a private tutor to help you catch up before classes begin." I stared at him in disbelief. True to his word, he moved quickly. Within weeks, I had admission to study accountancy at a prestigious university known for producing top graduates. When he handed me the acceptance letter, my hands trembled. "This is real?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "And you will excel." A private tutor began visiting the mansion every afternoon. At first, I struggled to keep up, my health occasionally slowing me down, but Ryan adjusted everything around me. My study schedule, my rest hours, even my diet. "You don't need to rush," he would say. "You have time." The day I left for campus felt unreal. My suitcase was larger than anything I had ever owned. Ryan stood beside the car, watching quietly as the driver loaded my belongings. "You'll call if you feel unwell," he said firmly. "I will. You'll focus on your studies. And you'll come back during breaks." I smiled softly. "If you'll have me." His gaze softened slightly. "You always have a place here." University life was overwhelming at first. Lecture halls filled with confident students. Endless assignments. Long nights studying under bright dormitory lights. I was often away from him. But I never stopped loving him. Every time I felt tired, I remembered his voice saying, "You will excel." Every time I felt unsure, I remembered the way he held my hand in the hospital and said I was not trouble. He sent me money regularly, more than enough for my upkeep. "You don't need to limit yourself," he said during one of our phone calls. "Eat properly. Buy your textbooks. Join study groups." "You're spoiling me," I teased gently. I'm investing in you, he replied. Will you visit? I asked quietly once. Yes, he said without hesitation. This weekend. And as I lay in my dorm room that night, staring at the ceiling with my acceptance letter still tucked safely in my drawer, I realized something. I had once believed being sold was the end of my future. Instead, it had given me one. And I vowed, no matter how far I had to walk or how hard I had to study, I would make Ryan Blackthorne proud. The weekend arrived slower than I expected. I had checked my phone at least 10 times that morning, reread his last message twice, and even cleaned my small dorm room as if he would inspect it personally. I'll be there by noon, he had written. By 11:45, I was already standing outside the campus gate. When his car finally pulled up, sleek and familiar, my heart reacted the same way it had the night he rushed me to the hospital. Fast and unsteady. The door opened and Ryan stepped out. He looked the same as always, well-dressed, composed, quietly powerful, but there was something softer in his eyes when they landed on me. You've lost weight, he said immediately. That's the first thing you're going to say? I replied, trying not to smile too widely. I send you enough money to feed 3 people, he continued calmly. Are you studying instead of eating? I laughed softly. I'm fine, I promise. He studied me for a moment longer as if confirming it himself, then gave a small nod. Show me around. We walked through the campus together, students whispering as we passed. I pretended not to notice the curious stares. I told him about my classes, my professors, the accounting projects I was working on. He listened carefully, asking questions that made me feel like my studies truly mattered. You sound happy, he said at one point. I am, I replied honestly. For a moment, we simply stood there, the afternoon sun casting a warm glow over everything. Later, we sat on a quiet bench near the edge of campus where tall trees shielded us from most of the noise. The air was cool but comfortable. Simon, he said after a long silence. Are you lonely here? The question surprised me. Sometimes, I admitted. But I remind myself why I'm here. And why is that? I looked at him directly. To build a future where I can stand beside you properly. His expression shifted slightly, something deeper surfacing in his gaze. You don't need to build anything to stand beside me, he said quietly. I want to, I replied. Not because I owe you, but because I love you. The words slipped out before fear could stop them. The world felt still after that. He did not look shocked. He did not look uncertain. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against mine before intertwining them. I was waiting for you to say it first, he admitted softly. My heart nearly stopped. I love you too, Simon. The confession felt warm. He lifted his hand to my cheek, his touch gentle as always, and tilted my face up slightly. May I? He asked quietly. I nodded. When his lips met mine, it was not rushed or desperate. He kissed me softly. Warm and compassionate. My fingers tightened slightly against his coat as I leaned into him, feeling safe in a way I had never known before. When we pulled apart, our foreheads rested together. And as we sat there beneath the quiet trees, hands intertwined, I realized something that made my chest ache in the best way. The day my father sold me, I thought my life had ended. But it was only the beginning. Because for the first time, I was not surviving. I was loved by the most caring alpha in the territory. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, leave a comment and subscribe for more interesting BL stories. Thanks for watching.